British Design Fund is an early stage investment fund that specifically invests in and provides support for purpose-led UK product design and manufacturing companies. The fund has been in operation for over 3 years and has built a rich and diverse portfolio of enterprising startups, which represent the cream of British invention. And today I am delighted to be joined by the CEO, Damon Bonser, who will go into more depth about the fund and the exciting opportunities available in the market. Damon, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Damon, can you start by telling us a little bit about the British Design Fund itself, its background, and what you do?
Absolutely. So the British Design Fund is one of the only early stage funds that invests in purpose-led British design and manufacturing startups. We started it, as you said, going for 3 years, but we came up with the idea about 5-6 years ago in response to a gap in the market here in the UK that we saw. So early stage, typically technology-driven businesses that had some element of manufacturing required to take that solution through to market. We found that many of those startups looking for seed capital found it really difficult to have conversations with investors. We couldn't find really experienced investors out there in the market, certainly not structured in the way of a fund that had the expertise and were comfortable with hardware to take it through to market.
Can you tell us a little bit about the backgrounds of the team at the British Design Fund?
Sure, there's quite a few of us now, but the founding team, effectively, we're predominantly from the manufacturing space. So we're a mixture of manufacturing entrepreneurs, creative and design professionals from corporate. So, and the reason I sort of mentioned that is it's quite a point of difference for us. We describe ourselves as an operator-led fund. So we very much come from the understanding of what the investees are looking for and have to go through as they take their products through to market and scale them. And so the founding team, so myself, as you say, CEO, my background is very much early stage product design and manufacturing, launching brands into market, and sort of really dealing with that, the firefighting and hopefully avoiding as many of the pitfalls as you take these early stage businesses through to market. So I'm sort of very much the startup expert here for hardware companies. But then other members of the team and founding directors include David Kremer, who sort of the founder, very famous for bringing through and commercializing Rubik's Cube, and has built up a phenomenally successful licensing business, and is a prolific sort of hardware investor as well. So David joined as one of our founding directors, as did our kind of refer to him as my co-founder, our chairman, John Mathers, former CEO of the Design Council. So again, I could kind of go on. There's quite a few of us, but more recently we've welcomed people like Sir John Rose, former CEO of Rolls-Royce, has joined our investment committee. We have Luke Johnson, sort of famous from hospital, very very active investor and very well known within hospitality sector, but also knows product, knows his hardware really well. And Will Hobb has also recently joined us, again from the retail world, very well known. So yeah, so we have some family offices on board as well. And many of our strategic investors have then joined the team in the form of the investment committee. And that works really well for us, because we get a really sort of broad spread across different sectors, but we're all united in the fact that we understand hardware, we understand product. If you kind of look at some of our team members, some of them are sort of very prolific engineers and investors, but some are more from the kind of go-to-market retail and marketing side.
Very impressive team that you have there, Damon.
Thank you.
So the fund has been in operation for over 3 years. Can you tell us how much has been raised and how many companies the fund has invested in to date?
Yeah, so we've raised 4 funds now, almost £3 million under management, and that's spread across 23 different companies in the portfolio. Typical ticket sizes that we put into the companies is 150,000. And very often very often this is part of a slightly larger round because it's typically more than 150 that the companies will need to take them through. But that's our sort of sweet spot ticket. But we'll often price and lead the rounds. We'll often come alongside maybe some other angel groups, but they'll look to us to price and lead as the hardware and engineering expert, sort of in the round.
And can you tell us what sectors does the fund invest into and why?
So sector-wise, we're quite agnostic. The big hurdle that all of our companies must kind of get over is that there must be some element of manufacturing. So fundamentally, they're hardware and engineering-led businesses that we're helping take through to market. So the biggest filter for us is that hardware piece. They must be. We talk in terms of TRLs, which is a bit of an engineering speak, but that's a technology readiness level, and we look for companies, startups that are around the TRL 5 or 6, so they have a physical prototype that they can demonstrate to a customer and prove there's interest, proves there's some sort of validate some of that demand in the market, and then we help them take them through. So that's not a sector thing. That's the nature of the of how they take their solution technology through to market. But once you've got over that, we can talk through some of the criteria later on. But in terms of sectors, we're not then mandated in terms of which sectors we go into. As long as there is that, as long as they're early stage, they need assistance to get them into market, and there is a physical prototype at TRL 5 or 6, we can consider it. I'd say there are some sectors that we avoid. They often don't meet some of our other criteria. So food and beverage. I mean, some people think of, when we talk about physical product, obviously everyone has their own idea of kind of, they go to different places for physical product. But for us, we avoid anything like food and beverage. That's there's typically not strong IP in those kind of businesses, and that's one of the criteria we must meet. We also avoid, I'd say, very deep tech medical device businesses. Again, one of our criteria is that we like to get involved with businesses that are about 12 months out from trading. So we're very much that go-to-market within the early stage hardware companies. And typically, medical device businesses will go through several years of kind of clinical trials. It's usually more than 12 months from a fund like us getting involved that they would be able to go through to market. So, but aside from that, we are very broad. And if you look at our kind of portfolio across the 23 today, we have things that touch upon solutions that play into the automotive sector. We have a little bit of fashion. Again, we kind of don't often do fashion. We sometimes find the purpose-led angle, and combined with the IP that we look for isn't always there. But yeah, very broad. So you could almost say we're sector agnostic, but everything, the real unifying pieces are hardware.
And what stage are the companies at that the fund invests into, and what's a typical investment size for you?
Yeah, so very typically, our ticket is 150,000. That's our sweet spot. We can flex that a little bit, but 150,000 ideally. And the stage, as I sort of indicated, we like them to be about 12 months out from trading. We're very, very good at taking businesses through to market. So that whole go-to-market piece, kind of getting them through the last few stages of compliance and product safety certification and launching them in, setting them up with manufacturers and scaling. That really plays to our strengths. But again, in terms of what we're mandated in terms of our our sort of investment memorandum, they can have revenues as long as they sort of fall into our sweet spot of valuations. They can have early revenues. I mean, sometimes that will be in the form of, say, paid trials, or they might have pre-orders that they've got from maybe some of the kind of crowdfunding product sites out there. But I'd say most typically they are pre-revenue and about 12 months out. But as I mentioned before, they must be able to prove some kind of demand from the market. So they need to have demonstrated it to the target customer that there is interest, and then we look further than just we look for things like LOIs. If it's a sort of B2B business, LOIs, purchase orders, amazing, but often it is just sort of indications of interest at this stage.
Damon, can you tell us, how does the fund source its investee companies?
So our deal flow is it's very unique, and the sources of origination are quite unique as well. So we spend a lot of time putting content out into the design, into the early hardware and design space through things like hardware incubators, design agencies that are focused specifically on maybe rapidly prototyping product and taking it to sort of TRL 4 and 5. So we spend a lot of time putting content out to those places, so that because these guys are often the ones that see deals very, very early on. And then they introduce us across to us. We can put funding in, and some of that funding will help, will allow those companies to continue working with those design agencies and paying the fees. So that's one. That's we spend a lot of time doing that. We also work with some of the places you'd expect, places, Royal College of Art, Imperial, kind of Brunel University, some of these sort of design centres, and that they often have incubators attached to them. So we will go in as kind of, either entrepreneurs in residence or experts in residence. Will provide content, investor readiness sessions, but we'll get then exposure to these companies before they typically go out to market. We'll have spent, maybe someone in the team might have spent sort of 6 months or so with them, getting to understand how the team operates and the problem that they're addressing. And then, as you'd expect, when you look at the kind of makeup of the directors, the team, and the investment committee, like the network effect of that, like collectively we get sent quite a lot individually anyway, that funnels through to the team here.
And how many companies would an investor expect to have in his or her portfolio?
Yeah, it's a 10. So for instance, for the 5th design fund, we're targeting minimum of 10 companies that you'll be spread across.
Can you tell us, how frequently does the fund deploy, and how long in general does it take to deploy funds?
So we aim to launch a seed fund every year. So BDF 5 is closing towards the end of March. That will then be deployed over the next typically 9 to 10 months, and then we kind of start lining up deal flow again for the following fund.
Damon, has the fund had any exits to date, and are you able to provide any colour on unrealised performance?
Sure. So we haven't had any exits to date, but in terms of performance, we assess the portfolio is using IRRs, so internal rates of return, and we're tracking around sort of 28.5% IRR, which is exceeding the target that we need to meet the return that we aim to give to our investors, which is a minimum of 3 times their money. So we're very happy with how they're tracking. But yeah, we're probably realistically about sort of 18 months out from our first exit, I would imagine.
So, final question for today. Please, can you highlight a recent fund investment and the reasoning behind it?
Right, okay, let me pick one from Fund 4. Okay, so this is quite it's a very niche sector, and I'll sort of highlight what we liked about it. So it's a business that came out of Nottingham University. Again, I'd describe it as engineer-led. The business is called Syntam Engineering, and they've developed a piece of hardware, so a piece of kit that they lease or sell into sort of heavy industry. Big industry players like Rolls-Royce will be a typical client for them. But they've developed a way to remove seized bolts and fasteners from almost from anything. But if you think of the setting of Rolls-Royce, imagine big engines coming in, that need servicing, taking apart, and maintenance. And lots of those bolts, those fasteners are seized, so the engineers have to drill them out, which is risky. The underlying asset is typically very expensive. You don't want engineers necessarily free wielding a drill, but also it's unpredictable in terms of how long it takes to remove all those bolts. Whereas what Syntam have developed is a very clever way of, it sounds a little bit science fiction, but a clever way of vaporizing the outside of these bolts so that they can be easily removed. So if you imagine, that allows then, that allows clients like Rolls-Royce to say, right, we've got this engine coming in, we know we've got 20 of these bolts, some of them might be seized, some of them might not. But if we use Syntam's solution, we can very accurately say how long this is going to take to remove those bolts. And also, it's obviously a lot safer for the engineers. There's less risk. There's almost no risk of the underlying asset, the engine itself, in this case, being damaged. And then there's quite a few verticals for this business as well. The other one that they're playing into, they don't have any clients necessarily in the space just yet, is kind of around remanufacturing. So this whole drive to the right to, more than the right to repair, but the right to reuse. So the things our world is filled with a lot of hardware that hasn't been designed yet to be reused. So things like, you can imagine old cars, car chassis, components, they've been built, they're out there in the market. There's really valuable materials and components within them, but they're really hard to what we call remanufacture. So they're hard to take apart and take those components out. So again, this will be a part of the service proposition for Syntam, and we like it. So one of the things we like about it, I mean, it's a really well articulated problem. There's little competition, but there is competition that's validated what's going on. These guys have patented a solution that works, in our opinion, in a superior way to the competition, but also it's purpose led, and this is something that all of the businesses we invest in have to meet. So by purpose led, people can read that in different ways. To us, it means that if this business doesn't launch this product, doesn't get through to market, is the world a little bit worse off, So this ticks a box. It's doing something very, very impactful. It's very, very important that this is the direction of travel for manufacturing. Certainly from the remanufacturing point of view. And obviously lots of other criteria that we look for, the committee look for, but that was a recent and interesting and very sort of unique business, I'd say, which is quite typical. It's got a lot of engineering in there, not necessarily what we'd sort of it's not consumer focused again, which is a lot of our stuff is B2B, but yeah, a good example.
Certainly is a good example. Sounds like a great company. Damon, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Catherine.